What's cooler than tinnitus? Not jacking up your hearing in the first place, which is why I'm going to compare 3 electronic over-ear protectors that come in under $50, and I'm going to tell you which one you should buy. Is it going to be the Howard Leight Impact Sports, the Walker Razor Slims, or the Caldwell Emax Pros that broke during the filming of this intro, which I filmed last? Don't worry, they didn't do this during the testing and it has no indication of how they perform throughout the video. Thanks to Global Ordnance for providing ammo for this video. If you want some hot deals, check them out. They've been very supportive of the channel. Also, if you like the 9mm or the AR-15 that I show in this video, check out my channel, 12 Spies, where you'll find dedicated reviews on those and more. But for now, you're watching TGC. Let's get to our sponsor and we'll get right into it. Features. Let's start with the Impact Sports by Howard Leight. The ear cup design is the slimmest of the 3, but rated the lowest at 22 decibels of reduction. But 1 decibel is like... It features a cutout on the bottom half to accommodate a better cheek weld, which I like. The ear pads are a click-in design, which is handy for replacement with either another factory pad or an aftermarket gel pad. The latter I recommend for any of these because of the better seal, better comfort, especially with iPro, and the cooler feel they provide on hot days. The Walkers I already own have these, and it makes a big difference for only 15 or 20 bucks, trust me. Power and gain are controlled by a rubberized and grippy wheel with a gated off position that clicks, and it has a 4-hour auto shutoff. This model runs on 2 AAA batteries and has a compartment that's easy to access. Included in the box is a manual, 2 batteries, and an auxiliary cord. The Walker Razors have the cleanest and most appealing design of the group, which is probably why I bought a pair a couple years ago. Ear cup design is the second slimmest, or second thickest depending on your preference, with a 23 decibel noise reduction rating. Ear pads are glued in, and I can attest that they can be removed with a flathead screwdriver, but it feels like a fine line between removal and destruction. I think most people won't want to bother with it. Operation is much like the Howard Leights, with a more defined clicky wheel with a paddle boat grip design that provides better grip and feedback, but with no auto shutoff. It runs on 2 AAAs, the battery door is straightforward, and included in the box is a manual, 2 batteries, but no auxiliary cable like the other 2. Last is the Caldwells. The ear cup design is thick, thickest of the group by a lot, with a 23 decibel noise reduction rating, so you don't gain anything over the Walkers for that thickness, at least on paper. Ear pads are fixed like the Walkers. The biggest difference between the other 2 is the power and gain design. There are individual buttons per function, an illuminated power button, and separate increase and decrease gain buttons. Power will auto shut off after 4 hours without any input. Another distinctive feature is the 3 AAA battery capacity, 1 more or 50% more than the others, though the Howard Leights are the only ones that list their battery life. I'm going to go out on a whim and say that with auto shutoff and 50% more battery capacity, the Caldwells should exceed the 350-hour battery of the Howards, but that could vary based on the temperature, battery quality, or your preferred gain setting. Compared to the others though, the design is really lacking. The controls are frustrating to use when you can't see them, which is anytime they're on your head, and the buttons have no physical feedback, just tones. Also, locating the buttons when you're wearing gloves is very difficult. The battery door is also unnecessarily complicated. Hopefully the larger battery capacity means you don't have to mess with it as much. The Howards have good controls, the slimmest design, auto shutoff, and an easy to remove ear pad, so it takes it in features. The Walkers were very close behind. If you don't care about changing out the pads, then it comes down to the auto shutoff, but it's still good overall. And the Caldwells were held back by their fussy controls and bulbous design, despite the largest battery capacity and auto shutoff. Build quality. The Howards and the Walkers both have beefy connections between the cords and the frame, good stitch quality, and the connectors from the headbands to the ear cups are similarly beefy. The fit and the finish on the Walkers, however, is a cut above, with no shiny plastics and no sharp edges. The rubber auxiliary cover and metal mic screen should hold up well over time. And where the other 2 make do with a foam sheet inside the ear cup, the Walkers have a woven material that feels more premium and tear resistant. Everything is just more substantial, and it's the most premium of the group by a bit. The Howards are still good, the faux leather on the headband is different but well executed, and the shiny plastics feel cheaper overall, and they're just a step down compared to the Walkers, but it's still acceptable for this price. The Caldwells were way behind the others. Mold lines, bad stitching, hard sharp plastics, and the connections from the cords and the headband are much less robust than the others. They also have the longest cords, but unnecessarily so. I thought maybe the headband would telescope the furthest to accommodate larger heads.
Look at the size of that boy's head.
But no, even at full extension, there's about 2 inches of unnecessary cord, which makes them the most likely to snag and break, and it looks dumb. So while the Walkers were top, the Howards an acceptable second, the Caldwells trailed far behind and get 0 points. Also, they just try to No matter what you do, they try to fold back up on their own, which makes me think that you're not supposed to use them. Comfort. What I consider comfortable is pressure distribution across the headband, squeeze, and their effect on a cheek weld. In first place were the Walkers. The headband has the most comfortable padding, though by a small margin over the Howards, but they contoured the most, evenly distributing the weight of the headset across my head. This didn't make a huge difference short term, but over a couple hours, especially with regular movement, it added up. The ear pads have the softest padding of the group, but it's still effective, and the angle design on the bottom of the ear cups accommodated a cheek weld just fine. The Howards are the next most comfortable and not far behind the Walkers. They feel the lightest, and the thin ear cups with the cutout on the bottom half was effective with the cheek weld. The Caldwell headband has a 4-inch section across the top that doesn't flex and puts all the pressure on the very top of your head, and they squeeze the most with no noticeable benefit. They're the only ones in this comparison that I would call uncomfortable, and the ear cups are much bigger and more cumbersome with the cheek weld, so they get 0 points in this category. Sound suppression and electronic quality. Since these were the only instrumented portions of the test, I grouped them together to save time, but they'll have separate points. For the test, I utilized a 22 long rifle Grand Power K22 X trim, a 9mm AREX 02, and a 223 Special Ops Tactical Nighthawk AR-15, the muzzle brake on the latter providing the most pressure for the test. I ran a mic underneath the ear cups to help determine the overall sound suppression, the clarity of the sound floor, effective sound boosting for far-off noises, how they cope with wind noise, and their overall sound quality utilizing the auxiliary jack. The highest recorded levels were with the Howards during 223 firing, but it was a bit of an outlier and by a very small margin. On the flip side, the Howards recorded the lowest average decibels with 9mm. The Walkers and the Caldwells were very similar in their 223 performance, but the Caldwells were the loudest with 9mm by a decent margin, and the data and my ears both agreed on it. Otherwise, the performance was pretty balanced in the group, but because of its flat performance in this category and lowest decibels overall, I'm giving the Walkers the win. The Howards get second because their peak levels were not that far above the others, and the Caldwells get third because of their poor handling of 9mm. Hard to understand what contributed to that? Let me know in your comments below. The Howards dealt with wind noise the best. I think the foam cover on the microphones rather than a metal screen like the others has something to do with that. The Caldwells dealt worst with the wind, probably because they have the most outboard mic design. Sound enhancement was the most boosted though with the Caldwells, maybe in part to their larger battery capacity. Both the Walkers and the Caldwells will run on phantom power, meaning when the headsets are off, they'll still pull music from the source. Turning on the headset activates their monitoring mode, so we'll pipe in sound from the outside in addition to the auxiliary source, and the controls only affect the monitoring level, not the auxiliary level. The Howards must be on to function, however, and the volume adjusts the sound monitoring and the auxiliary source, so you spend more time adjusting the sources to get your desired balance, and you can't completely remove the external sound monitoring from the equation. The other unfortunate side of this is that there's no listening to music if the headset is dead. The Howards were good with wind, the Caldwells were the loudest, and the Walkers had the best sound quality. But the Walkers weren't last in any of those categories, so I think it's only fair that they take the win. I personally prefer wind performance to overall peak sound, so I'm going to give second to the Howards and third to the Caldwells. Alright, my closing thoughts. I think most people will be happy with either the Walkers or the Howards, and either make a great gift choice. The quality of the Walkers is really outstanding compared to the others, and it had the performance to back it up. I also think that these will last the longest, but if you frequently forget to turn off your earpros and you find them dead on your next range trip, the Howards might be a good idea. Also, I can't understate how good an upgrade the gel ear cups are, and if you feel uncertain about your DIY skills, the click-in ear pads with the Howards wins there too. The Caldwells unfortunately are not something I would recommend when the others are similarly priced and do a much better job protecting you from unwanted noise. And speaking of unwanted noise, there's more communities moving towards assault weapons bans. These are typically communities that already have strict gun laws and may or may not prosecute evil, and then they take it out on you, the lawful gun owner. Speaking of lawful gun ownership, it's a little hazy in our history because as the British ran mandatory gun confiscations for safekeeping, there were brave men and women that chose to disobey and gave us a chance so that we could have this great nation that we have today. So let's give thanks for those godly, brave men and women, and remember that the Second Amendment isn't just a right, it's the right that protects all other rights. So happy Thanksgiving, and God bless America.